We're live again.
Hello, hello.
Neither of us were sure that we will make it, but we did.
Exactly.
So, we're here. Let's start right away. For those of you joining first time, there is no script. We did not prepare anything. If you have questions, ask. If you have no questions and nobody asks anything, then we just close it. Those are the rules. And we have one from Ipos or Ipos. Hey, I trust you guys are doing well. We are, probably. I'm speaking in Scott's name as well. There we go.
We are.
Would you recommend using Kyverno cell policies over Kyverno policies, or would you recommend combining both? Thank you. My biggest complaint about Kyverno in the past was that I think that YAML was too much of a butchering it. Long story short, I prefer cell over some weird YAML. And when I say cell, I mean cell as a value of proper YAML, right? So I prefer cell policies.
So, and I actually prefer Kyverno policy standard, like the standard Kyverno policy with James path and whatever. But in the end, it comes down to ergonomics of what you prefer better. I don't think that I don't think one is better than the other. I think in the end, it comes down to what you prefer and what feels more natural to you and what you think more people in your organization will understand. The number one, those are the two things that actually matter, whether it's cell or James path or whatever. In the end, they do the same thing. So do whatever makes you feel more comfortable.
I was about to say, but I'm not 100% sure. I think that they're functionally the same.
Yeah, I think there's a bit more capabilities possibly in the Kyverno. I'm not sure everything is possible with cell in Kyverno. Just because they did have very advanced things. I don't know if all of that has been converted into cell functions, but the answer is, they're, for all intents and purposes, they're the same. So choose whatever feels better to you.
Okay, this is for you, Scott, or nobody. Definitely not for me. Talos versus RKE2 on-prem. Which one? And is there another better solution than those? I don't use on-prem. I just know that I don't like RKE 2.
Yes.
Or
okay,
1.
So
I know, actually, I think that RKE 2 is amazing compared to how horrible RKE 1 was.
Yes. RKE 2 is a huge improvement over RKE 1, and I still do not suggest it for any human being on planet Earth. But if it's between those two, the answer is Talos. Now, if you're using Talos, you use it together with Cluster API. I don't care if you're using Talos, if you're using KubeADM, Bootstrap provider, and control plane provider with Cluster API, but use Cluster API, and it has a provider for Talos Linux. So there's that. If you're going open source, that's how I would probably go. If you were not doing open source, then Spectral Cloud, and they use KubeADM under the hood with Cluster API. But anything based off of Cluster API that uses Talos or KubeADM are legitimate in my mind.
Okay. From Liam. I'd like to use Crossplane for managing resources. If I need to manage resources in small cloud provider and find that there is no official Crossplane provider for that cloud provider, what do? You use a project called Upjet. It's relatively easy to create a provider yourself, and then you're a nice person and you make it public and contribute it to everybody else. Scott created, yes. I think that Scott is churning providers every second week now, or something like that.
I think I've created like 10 or 12 providers. The first one will take you some time. It gets, the docs are kind of all over the place. You have to read some issues. They're getting better. They've gotten much better, but it does take a bit of time if you don't have experience in Go. But it's relatively very simple, and the benefit of it is huge. So it's worth spending that bit of time. And that's if there's a Terraform provider. If there's no Terraform provider, I'm sorry.
Another potential option, which I don't know how much it is present for smaller clouds, is that if they have an operator, then you can use that operator, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
If that's somebody created, today you need to wrap it inside of Crossplane object. Soon, when V2 comes, you can use it directly. So if something has an operator, you can go with that as well.
Exactly.
You could theoretically also, actually, third option, which is actually more or less similar to the first. If that cloud provider is covered by Cluster API, you can use that in composition.
Right. If all you're trying to do is create a Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For Kubernetes. right.
This is for managing resources. Yes.
Okay. From Revi, another one, if I may. What is the current state of the art paradigm for traces? I guess OTL is the start. OTL is not only the start; it's the only thing that makes sense for tracing today.
Well, and I will add one thing to that, though. The answer is Pixie, as what does the auto traces for you as a starting point, in my mind. Because when you install Pixie, it will do it without you needing to add auto instrumentation, for example, into your code bases, which, if you're in larger organizations, can be a serious pain to get developers even to add to their POM.XML or their package JSON or to their Go mod, the single things that are needed to get the auto instrumentation. So use Pixie. Pixie exports OTel. It also gives me a lot of other capabilities, but the format has to be OTel. I personally think Pixie is the best way to get the auto instrumentation. But, also start then integrating into your apps and adding custom instrumentations as needed.
And even if, for whatever reason, Pixie does not end up being your cup of tea, there is, for instrumentation, there is a bunch of tools way how to instrument. So, yes, OTel, don't waste time on instrumenting unless you want to instrument something very specific in your app. From Pau, $5. No, euros. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Really, really appreciate it. There are drones and artillery being fired above me. Send help.
I can't send help, but I'll send prayers for, the safety of everyone, Hopefully
Exactly.
everyone should have quieter and more peaceful days than the world has seen recently.
Okay, and this is the first time we have a pause because there are no questions. Actually, I always very often forget. This pause is good. I can do what I promised and then bring in
you should take off the comment that's hiding.
The
comment off that's hiding.
There we go. There we go. Codefresh, sponsor of this stream. Thank you, Codefresh, for sponsoring. And for everybody else, if you're not aware of Codefresh, it's basically GitOps on steroids, right? It uses ArgoCD. You can plug in your ArgoCD if you want to. And the whole idea is to really bring the whole SDLC, right? So ArgoCD would be the synchronization part. You can plug your ArgoCD into the system, connect it to Codefresh, then you annotate your applications so that they're aware that you're using Codefresh. You define your environments, staging, production, development, whatever you have. Create promotion rules under which conditions and what will be the different situations in which you want to promote here or there. And then you just start promoting stuff, right? So essentially, it's not that it solves GitOps. GitOps is fairly solved problem, but it solves what do you do outside of GitOps, right? And the biggest part is probably promotions. Everybody go there, type GitOps 2025. You get discount, and everybody's gonna be happy. Thank you, Codefresh, for promoting this. And now let's go back to the questions. Let's see, where are we? Hey, Scott, look at people can see you in flesh.
Exactly.
What was it? 2 weeks ago, I discovered that actually his background is not white. This is amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. This is all thanks to the donations to the channel. So thank you all.
Exactly. Now, the next thing that is on my bucket list for Scott, and then we're finished, is a light like the one I have, so that we actually see his face more than a background. From Ravi, another one. Talos is the only solution for Prometheus HA. No, there's a bunch of them. Bunch of them.
There's Thanos, there's Mimir, there's Cortex, there's Cortex is a big one. Mimir is another big one. There's also there's a few other ones as well. But basically the reason most people I think know Thanos is just because of the Prometheus operator and the ability to add the Thanos sidecar that's like injected in there, right? The other option that's very common is Victoria metrics that people use. Because
to me, the more important part about that whole story is that the format is Prometheus, right? And you don't necessarily have to have Prometheus itself or scaled Prometheus. That would be the case of Victoria metrics, right?
The one thing I will say without putting names out there and whatever, but there are things that claim to be Prometheus that are not, that do not actually fully implement the spec. Victoria metrics does. So Victoria metrics is actually like a pure replacement for, Prometheus, and it works great. There are other solutions out there that do not fully implement it. And you just have to be careful with what you use and how compatible it is with the Prometheus API. But Victoria metrics is a tear and replace solution. Everything works the same. It works even with the same pod monitor and service monitor CRs in Kubernetes from the Prometheus operator. It knows how to pick those up. So you don't even need to change anything at that level.
The Cortex and the other one, Talos, can be actually a bit, rough. Complex, exactly. That's a better word, right? So you might want to figure out whether you want completely CNCF like those two, or go for something free or charging, and then avoid some of the pain.
Or go with managed Prometheus from the different cloud providers and, save yourself the hassle of any management. Just, make your CFO a bit less happy at the end of the month, right? It's completely up to you. It's...
Okay, in your opinion, what is the most important technology you need to know for DevOps? I don't think that there is the answer, because it really depends what your company is using. There are some common things, like, and this is the hill I'm going to die on, Linux. If it's Windows, is for a server. Now, I'm not talking about laptops now. Run away. Just go somewhere else. Don't do that stuff, right? So you need to know some basics like Linux. And when I say Linux, I don't necessarily mean for you to compile your own Linux, but please, basics, containers, Kubernetes. Everything else depends. In your company, they might be using Azure, and in my company, they might be using Google Cloud, and somewhere else, AWS. Nobody can answer that.
I will say one other thing that I think is critical. And I think this is where a lot of DevOps people, right? And we're not going to get into that whole conversation we've had 30 times of the fact that there's no position called DevOps. But
no, there is position. There shouldn't be.
Right. Exactly. There's no actual, but Git. People do not know Git today. And in order to actually enforce like a DevOps culture and to actually enforce the ability of working with one another, in sync with one another, all of this, and working as a team with multi-personas, you have to know Git. And that does not mean only knowing Git clone, Git add, Git commit, Git push, and Git pull. It means also understanding how merge conflict works, what merge strategies are, what cherry picking is. You have to know these things because your developers do, meaning you need to know it, and it's the way for you to maintain your things well. So know Git.
Another actually thing that I feel that many DevOps people completely are oblivious or forget: learn how to write code and everything that goes with it. Please don't be the person who knows how to click buttons or only write YAML. And it can be Bash. I'm not picky here, just to be clear, but kind of something. Write code, whether it's scripts or it's Go or it's Java, I don't care what.
Yeah.
Any form of way. Beyond YAML.
Yeah.
Okay, where are we now? How to configure Kubernetes monitoring in Zabbix using Kubernetes API. I don't use Zabbix. You, Scott?
Neither do I. I haven't used Zabbix in many years, so no clue.
I don't know even whether Zabbix even does something special with Kubernetes. It's been years.
My guess is that they do because every single thing on planet Earth today does something for Kubernetes, or they say they do. So that would be my guess with no clue. But I can't imagine a monitoring company existing today that doesn't do something around Kubernetes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody does something about Kubernetes. But in my head, when I say Kubernetes, I mean, do it for real. Not anything WebSphere can run in Kubernetes. Kind of, I don't count those. Kind of, no. What's next? Oh, another $5. Harold, thank you so much. Scott, light is coming. How and where do I start learning AI? I don't know where to start learning. I can give you my choices for AI. And those choices is that for the model, I prefer Sonnet. Gemini now is okay as well.
3.5 or 3.7 for Claude?
I'm going back and forth. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I mean, 3.7 kind of basically remembers more what you did, but then makes some...
But it remembers it worse. It remembers more. It remembers more, but even the little it remembers is worse. True.
But here's my takeaway that I think that many people will misunderstand. I think that the key differences now and in the future are more in everything else than a model. I think if you have a good agent, you will have better results with good agent and worse model than vice versa. And speaking of agents, I'm in love with Cloud Code, and if that's scary for you because it's terminal based, Cursor, Windsurf, Klein, if you have money, is great. The Copilot is the worst, and I don't know how that happened because GitHub tends to do stuff well. I really don't understand how.
It's gotten much better, by the way. Like, just to say to their credit, because I am watching it, it's getting much better.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, maybe a few months ago, that they actually released agent mode, and now this starts making sense. I still not my first choice, but I can see kind of, okay, now this starts making sense, right? Two more things. One, because Scott told me about it, I'll get to that later. It's absolutely amazing. Start figuring out MCPs. You don't need many, but there are something like Context 7 is absolutely amazing. Having a memory MCP is amazing. Things that you don't really control from your laptop, like if you want to use Slack, is amazing. I don't use personally MCPs like Kubernetes MCP because I think that the agents are very capable now of using kube control. Yeah. And finally, the last one, I discovered it recently. I think that comes from Scott, Taskmaster. It's so freaking unbelievably amazing. I'm so impressed with it.
Yeah, it is. I'm a Claude person. I use, Claude Sonnet 3.5 only. I can't deal with 3.7. It hallucinates too much for me.
Have you tried Claude Code?
I have. I'm a bigger fan of, I only tested it briefly, and then I also tested the one that OpenAI released. I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but they released basically a direct competition to that, completely open source, actually, like Apache 2 license, so like real open source, and it's awesome.
Is it also terminal-based or?
Yeah. Terminal-based, exactly. It's direct competition to Claude Code, right? So yes, I do like that. I still am a bigger fan of working from the IDE personally today with this stuff, and that's why I'm a cursor person myself. I have tried Windsurf. I don't like it as much. I prefer, cursor personally. But I jump back and forth between that and VS Code because I really want to see where Microsoft and GitHub take Copilot. So I keep my eye on it consistently.
The only thing I use heavily cursor, both cursor and cloud code, back and forth. But the only important thing for me in cursor is that I disabled completely the auto mode.
Yeah.
Where they're trying to, I prefer waiting a few seconds longer and getting the result that makes sense. That auto mode is trash. I mean, it's not trash, it's good, but don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, do you know, from Alexander, do you know any smooth way to import resources already created with Terraform to Crossplane? Is it a good idea when attempting to switch to Crossplane from Azure Infra? So there are two things. One that is, none of them are smooth today, but I could imagine how importing Terraform as Crossplane managed resources would be relatively straightforward. I think that somebody could create a tool relatively easily, but I don't think that that's where you should go. You should be creating compositions, and there is nothing, as far as I know, reliable. I don't know if you especially, at least from the community, I haven't seen anything that allows you to create compositions, because it would be complex. You would probably need to somehow tell it, okay, give it a list of resources to create composition. I don't know.
So the way that I view this is like, I think it's a twofold thing, right? I think anytime you move between different API interfaces, let's say, because Terraform is an interface as well, right? Whatever you set in your TFRs, that's or your variables that then you implement in TFRs is an API, right? At some level. And therefore, and so is Crossplane. But we always have tech debt in our APIs, or we created bad abstractions or abstractions that were good that became leaky later on because we had to add other things and whatever. Moving to Crossplane is the time for you to redesign. I do not think that any tool that would just say, hey, convert this Terraform module as is to a composition is the correct way to go, because anytime I'm moving, there's going to be pain. At least get gain from that pain by creating a better API interface that is more fluid for your end users. At which point, the way to actually implement in the end, the best approach that I have seen is to basically create pause all of, scale down to 0 all of the composition functions when you're doing this. So they're all scaled to 0 so they won't run. Apply the composition. Apply the managed resources, which, as Victor said, are very easy to create from the Terraform state. I've used Cursor to do that, just in the AI. Give it, here's my Terraform, config. Here's the TF state. Create the managed resources from this. Works great, right? Like, you can do that easily. And then what you do is you add the managed resources and then just add the owner reference to the composition. When you power back up the functions, everything just comes in and starts working, and it is relatively simple. That may sound complex, but it's really not. It's just script preparation in advance that would do these things for you. I'm planning on writing a blog post on this at some point as well, with like a GitHub repo, like kind of showing what the flow would be. But in general, it's not that difficult. But
it would be easier, not easy, if it would be widely adopted that people are creating Terraform modules themselves, and then just basically the project would be instance of that module, right? But that's not what people do normally.
Well, but
you would
hold
have
on.
many different projects.
And that's where I disagree with you, because what is the definition of a module? any Terraform workspace I'm in is technically a module. I'm just not reusing that module.
Yeah, no, so okay, so yes. But what I was thinking now, module in terms like kind of, okay, we have 50 databases and they're all different values of the same module.
Which in most
not
companies it is that way. In most
Yeah?
large companies, at least that I've seen, most large companies have that. Maybe a bit more staggered than that, but in general, modules are relatively implemented in the larger companies. In smaller companies where everyone has their own AWS credentials and everyone runs Terraform locally from their machine, and this, yeah, no, everyone just downloads from Stack Overflow, something that works.
Okay, the next one from Pau. I'm operating in an air-gapped environment and trying Crossplane. Cool. For now, I've mirrored all providers' functions and configurations. How can I handle providers' dependencies correctly? I'm not sure I understand. What do you get? What he means by dependencies?
It's absolutely terrible today. And I agree. And it's an issue that is actually being worked on right now. There are open issues for this that have to do with how the dependency, basically when you deploy, Victor, this is like when I deploy, let's say, AWS S3 provider, which then has its dependency of the family provider from which registry it's pulling, right? Or when I do a configuration where everything comes from and all of that. So there are challenges around this. Currently, I can't tell you much of a better way. There's two ways of doing all of these things, which is either just to rebuild, which is not that difficult because it's only a single make command that you have to run from the GitHub repo and just change the parameter of the registry it pulls to. So instead of mirroring, just build and push. Relatively very simple. All these providers are open source, so it's easy to do that. At which point everything is fine. The other one is to turn off dependency installation, which you can do as well, and then just install the family provider, install the S3 provider, install the S2, the EC2 provider. You just have to install the family provider yourself instead of having it come through dependencies. There's work to make this better going on, though.
I cannot talk about it, but that will change radically in months to come. From Gotu, Bootstrap cluster using Crossplane and set up everything in using Crossplane in place of Helm or go with ArgoCD. In place, so I'm not sure that instead of ArgoCD is great. Or Flux or whatever you're using, but yeah, you can definitely replace your Helm with Crossplane, and you should. Let me actually give a more generic answer. You should replace your Helm with your controllers and CRDs, whether that's Crossplane or something else. Sorry, your Helm charts. Just to be 100% clear, I'm not talking about third-party Helm charts.
Exactly. So there's that. And the other thing that I would say when it comes to third-party charts, still replace your Helm install with Crossplane. Meaning use the Helm provider within Crossplane or use the Kubernetes provider object with a Helm release of Flux CD because, you know, we want to use good GitOps tools and not the one mentioned on the screen here, right? Or use that one's application CR. But, you know, you can do all of that through Crossplane as well. So what you're really replacing with Crossplane, I don't like to think of Crossplane or Crow or Cradix or Kubevela or any of these as a replacement for Helm. They're a replacement for Helm install. They are a replacement for the interface. If you want in the back end to do Go templating functions within a composition, that's no different than a Helm chart. It's just inside of a YAML in Kubernetes, right? From the chart perspective level, right? There's no difference in that. The difference is my interface, my API, and that then I'm getting consistent reconciliation, which is what Crossplane is giving me. I'm just changing how I interact. And that interaction goes through Crossplane now. So if you prefer Helm over KCL, go ahead and use Helm still, but put that behind Crossplane.
Yeah. Or to be more precise, for your apps, if you prefer Go templating, which happens to be used by Helm.
Exactly.
Keep
Use
using
Go
Go templating.
templating. Exactly.
Okay, what's your preferred way, from Anthony, what's your preferred way to synchronize some secret in GCP Secret Manager to Kubernetes cluster? Any solution with Crossplane? Nothing baked into Crossplane. There's some work to be done, but not for the same purpose, probably. And the solution is, and I'm pretty sure Scott will agree, external secrets.
3 letters. ESO.
Exactly.
Exactly, right? An external secrets operator is the correct way to do this. No question.
You know, if it would be self-managed something and you say, I don't want to go through the pain of running my own vault or whatever, then maybe something else. But if you're in cloud, you're in Google Cloud, just use Google Cloud Secret Manager and ESO and you're golden. And one thing that many people miss, also use it to push secrets over there, right? So if you're using Crossplane, you're mentioning Crossplane in your comment, you will be generating secrets, push those up.
Yeah. It's also something that, like, I will just mention on this, something that always comes up from the community is like, Crossplane creates secrets not in the format that you want, right? Like sometimes like a managed resource returns something as DB hostname and I actually need it somewhere else as hostname or whatever. You can use external secrets for that as well. External secrets is a Swiss Army knife of how to manage secrets, to copy secrets from one namespace to another, from one cluster to another, from your cluster to Google Secrets Manager, from GCP Secret Manager to AWS Secrets Manager through, Kubernetes, right? You can do anything with it, which is why it's such a powerful tool, because it won't only be used for this. You'll find 15 use cases to use ESO, and you only need to know one tool.
Exactly. From Amit, I'm a great fan. Can you give your take on Pulumi Kubernetes operator versus Crossplane for managed resources with Kubernetes? I haven't used Pulumi operator. So I will answer for Terraform with assumption. Have you, let's start with this. Scott, have you used the operator? Is it any different from Terraform operator?
No, Pulumi never made any sense to me on planet Earth, so I did not even take a look at their Kubernetes operator. I do not believe in general purpose languages as IAC. So no.
There you go. I will answer with assumption that it's working in a similar way as Terraform operator and ignore now that Pulumi is, Go, Java, or whatever you're using, and this is HCL. The problem with all those is that they are not treating, in my head, the biggest problem is that they're not treating individual resources separately, right? With their own control loops and everything. So basically you have a blob of resources and then you try to periodically reconcile all of those at once. And I think that does not work. I think it goes against the logic in Kubernetes. And it's conceptually not much different than putting WebSphere into Kubernetes. I'm very negative towards it. I'm just assuming that that's how Pulumi works. Maybe it's not.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I will say like 2 things about this. I know that Pulumi started with their like YAML as another interface for Pulumi. I don't like that. I'm guessing that they based the Kubernetes operator off of that. But like the whole value of Pulumi has less providers than Terraform does, has less all of this. Their whole idea was being general purpose language. I don't like it when tools, if they have a general idea and they believe in that idea, I don't like then creating like, okay, what is the value of Pulumi then if it has a YAML API to it? What's the difference between that and HCL or that in Crossplane managed resources? Like, I just don't get it at that point. Where I will say that I differ from you, Victor, I agree with you in general that managing each resource on its own is better than, what like Terraform through the Open Tofu Flux CD provider, right? Terraform controller, which is now the Open Tofu controller. Because it's part of the CNCF, right? But in general, I don't think that it is a bad idea as a first step to use, for example, the Terraform provider of Crossplane just to get the API above my things and then move, right? Or to use the Flux Open Tofu controller as a first step. That's not where you want to go. That's not the final step, but it can be a lift and then shift instead of lift and shift altogether, if that works for your organization.
I agree 100% on that. As long as, and it's part of what you said, it's important. As long as it's lift and shift and then refactor, right? Kind of, if it's lift and shift, I have the same feeling about some applications. Kind of, hey, you want to move something to Kubernetes that shouldn't be there, that's fine. If that's your stepping stone towards refactoring it into something more appropriate, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%. Just don't, what I'm trying to say is that if the goal is to run it as is in Kubernetes forever and ever, then I'm not sure that you will get any tangible value. If that's a stepping stone, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. It's, by the way, I say the same thing with Windows containers in Kubernetes. For like .NET that you're slowly migrating to .NET Core, I say the same thing. Windows in Kubernetes is there for a temporary solution to bring your app fully in so you get the networking, and then migrate very quickly to .NET Core Linux and then move over the microservices. But that way, at least everything at once can be moved into the cluster with the networking, with all of that, and then slowly you start moving it over without breaking changes all the time, right? There are bad decisions you can make, or there can be bad technology that we use or bad technological decisions, because Terraform is a great technology. Okay, don't like terraforming Kubernetes is a bad technological decision, right? So its bad tech decisions can be made for the greater purpose, and it can be the right decision, even though it's the wrong for a short period of time.
Okay, from Alexander, regarding hardening security of clusters, specifically AKS, is Kubescape the best option, or should one cut up the dollars for Defender for containers? I don't know what is Defender. Do you know what is Defender?
Microsoft Defender for containers. Yeah, it's Microsoft's like security tool. I will say Kubescape from the open source perspective is probably the best. From the perspective of Kubescape versus commercial offerings, I think it comes nowhere near what some of the different commercial offerings give you. Defender for containers is very good. It's also well integrated into the rest of the Defender suite within Azure. So if you're anyways using Microsoft Defender across the board within your organization, having it for containers as well can be really nice to get the unified kind of UX and all of that in management. Otherwise, things, there are other tools for runtime protection, for hardening security that are commercial from the companies like Palo Alto Prisma or Aqua Security, or all of these that have really strong tools as well, that are very good and worthwhile to look at. They all offer more Armo, right, above Kubescape, right, offers more than Kubescape does as open source. From an open source perspective, it's great. But again, security and backup are the two things that I personally believe that you pay for, because those are the things you don't want to mess with. Other things, maybe you go open source, maybe you don't, depending on your comfort level and expertise in those things. Security and backups are the things I think you need to go with commercial support. That's my personal opinion.
The one thing I like about potentially starting with Kubescape is that sometimes you're not, since it's open source, you can just start with it. It might not be everything you need, but kind of like start with it, use it, and then say, hey, this feels good. And then go for Armo commercial option, right? At least I personally prefer to start with, even though I 100% agree, security is something you pay for, right? But it might be nice to get a feeling before committing through.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say is that I have seen companies that let's say go with one of the commercial offerings or whatever, but they say, you know what, it's too expensive. I'm only going to have this in production. Okay. And listen, I'm not here to get into the questions of, how they're spending their money and if they're spending it correctly or not. I would say dev environments where more people have access to clusters and typically the security is more lax. That's actually where it really matters there as well. But if that's really the situation, use Kubescape in your dev environment, right? Like use Kubescape there and then use whatever commercial thing you're using in production. Right? But like don't if what you have is a commercial solution and you don't have the money to run it everywhere, run something open source, Kubescape or whatever, run that in dev. So at least you have something running, right? Have some level of protection.
And also, quite a few things you can do to harden your stuff is not even necessarily directly related with security tools, right? Those security tools will not tell you to probably use, I'm guessing, correct me, Scott, those security tools will not tell you use Scratch as a base image instead of whatever you're doing, right? They're going to tell you how much vulnerabilities you have. And those tools will not tell you, for example, lock down your cluster and use GitOps, whichever tool to synchronize it because that's inherently more secure and so on and so forth. So there are many things that you don't necessarily... You need security tools, just to be clear. I'm not saying don't use them, but there's a whole world outside of those tools of the things you should be doing.
Exactly, right? It's security is an ongoing thing. There's not a, okay, my cluster is secure. No, you have added another level of security to your cluster. It's now time to add the next one, right? Like it's a continuous process of adding different layers because more security vectors are being found every day and attack vectors are being found every day. So security is an ongoing thing. One element of that is runtime protection or hardening.
Oh, lights are coming. Scott, Akiva, thank you so much. And Amit, also, thank you so much. I don't know, what's the currency?
Shekel. That's the Israeli shekel.
Okay.
Yes.
You could have made the symbol of your money easier to recognize.
It's the two Hebrew letters of Shin and Chet, which is shekel chadash, the new shekel. So it's like the words of the currency, just the first letters on top of one another. So yeah.
Okay, from Pau. For installing components into my EKS cluster deployed with Crossplane and planning to use Flux, you just made Scott very, very happy. I'd like the position to bootstrap Flux automatically and point to repo. Is that a good approach?
It's a great approach.
Yes.
It's a great approach. You use the Helm provider of Crossplane to install the Flux 2 Helm chart from the Flux community repo, and you then create another step that waits for that Helm release to be valid and then installs a Git repository manifest that watches a specific Git repo. If you want to use the GitHub provider to create that repo, you could, or the GitLab provider, right? Like you can create a fully self-sustained thing. 100% the correct approach to do. You are a very, very smart man.
Misha, first, thanks a ton. They really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the question is, could you walk us through what a secure ArgoCD setup should look like?
Yes. kubectl delete @-n ArgoCD.
That's probably the biggest problem, actually, with ArgoCD. No, actually, there are others. But, yeah. I will let you do the rant. You did it already in like at least 5 episodes. 2 minutes rant, Scott.
Okay. Managing RBAC through a CSV file. Not that secure. Not running with the actual user's permissions, but basically being Tiller on steroids. Thank you for bringing us back to Helm v2 with one user that does everything in my cluster. I could go on, but ArgoCD from a security perspective is an absolute nightmare in my mind and breaks every Kubernetes practice that ever should have existed of using Kubernetes RBAC like Flux does, like Cap Controller does, like Rancher Fleet does, like a simple cron job does. So I have a major issue with that in ArgoCD. So Secure and ArgoCD are antithesis of one another.
I I have a feeling that both ArgoCD and Flux V1, just to be 100% kind of clear, were designed when we didn't really have good understanding of Kubernetes. I mean, or
hold on. What came first, Flux or Argo? What came first, Flux or Argo? What came first, Flux or Argo? Flux.
I think Flux.
Flux. Yeah. Flux uses Kubernetes RBAC. We know if the first tool did it right, why did the second tool get it so wrong?
I don't remember the RBAC story of Flux V1. It's been a while. Was it like proper Kubernetes RBAC?
Yes,
even
yes.
In V1?
Service accounts. You gave the service account that it uses to reconcile. Yeah. Or let's take another great example of where the first comers got it right and the later ones got it wrong. And just because EKS was mentioned before, GKE got authentication right. Azure got authentication right. EKS did like ArgoCD. Let's do an auth config map that has some random structure, plain text that has my configuration.
There are a couple of things there. I'm not sure whether if Flux came first, probably did. But I don't think that there is a much difference. I don't think that they learned from each other at that time when they both appeared. So I wouldn't put it kind of like, it's not the same story like GKE and EKS, which really came much later, right? What I do give a lot of credit to Flux is that they actually, no matter what they did right and what they did wrong, at one moment they said, okay, now I understand, let me actually start from scratch. Flux V2 is basically completely, it could have been a different name for all I care.
The only thing it has in common is the name Flux. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, basically, they sat down and said, okay, what did we learn so far? Let's apply that learning. And ArgoCD is evolving, but when you evolve something, there is always some baggage that you have from before that you cannot get rid of.
ArgoCD is acting almost like Java, where because they're scared of breaking users and, backwards compatibility is so important, they just stay with the same legacy stuff over time, and making changes is, such a long process. Now, there's a reason that enterprises use Java. Because it is so stable, right? It's purely that there's that approach versus there's the Python approach of Python 2 to Python 3 of, we're going to break everything, but we're going to make it completely different and better. Right now, that was not handled well, the migration there. The migration from Flux 1 to Flux 2 was actually done correctly, right? So I'm not saying that, breaking changes are always good, but they can be good if you create the right instructions and helpers to help you migrate between the two.
Yes. And also, it's very hard once you start having some business on top of project, product, whatever it is. It is actually very hard to drop it and start over, right? And for Flux, without naming names, actually, it was a very tough battle to actually get to Flux V2.
Oh, yeah.
Let's put it that way, right? Kind of, it wasn't something that everybody was in agreement about, right?
But in the end, it happened.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
And now I'm going to be evil. And it did not help the adoption.
It did. It did help the adoption, and then we've went down.
Some other, you're right. Actually, some other stupid decisions afterwards made it,
Yes.
So the lesson learned here is that if you're in a business of selling something on top of open source, you need to have a differentiating features from open source so that you can sell something, but you must also watch what your competition is doing.
Yes, and your differentiation cannot be what is in the open source of your competition.
That's what I was referring, kind of like... Whatever
I have a UI. You pay for the UI. It's like, but they give me UI for free.
Exactly. You want to answer this, or?
What's the state of the Flux project? State of the Flux project is that it is active, it is maintained, it is contributed to. it has had a bad rap of, from the community of worry because of WeaveWorks going under, all of that. Flux is healthy. Flux is not the dominant player. If we talked 2 years ago and Flux and Argo were head to head, they aren't head to head anymore in terms of adoption. In terms of actual, though, like quality of maintenance, I'd say that they're in par with one another. Both of them are well maintained. Both of them are getting updates. Both of them have good maintenance cycles, all of that. It's a smaller community, but that does not mean worse.
If it would be something else, I would be much more concerned with the decision to use Flux. Now I'm not that concerned because I think that both of them are mostly feature complete. Both of them are in a way in a maintenance mode. I know that new features are coming, but there is nothing, it's not early days anymore.
The core is there. The core is all there. Exactly. So they're adding a new generator to application sets in ArgoCD, and they added a PR reviewer in the Flux operator from, whatever control plane, right? Like, okay, cute, nice, maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't, but the core concepts of GitOps are strong in all of them.
Where probably ArgoCD has an edge, and I think that what I'm about to say is very early stages, so I'm not happy with any, but quite a few projects are now working on ways how to do promotions, and quite a few of them are very tied, which I don't think it's a good idea to begin with, just to be clear, but very tied to ArgoCD. So like promotion might be actually where ArgoCD is in a better shape, simply because people make silly decisions to make it ArgoCD specific instead of just kind of like make it independent of those tools. But
exactly. There is benefits of that, and that's where we're going to have to see. It's just like the questions that were coming up a while ago of like OpenTofu versus Terraform. In the end, it depends where the ecosystem goes, right? In the end, both tools do what they're supposed to do. The question is where the ecosystem goes. The fall of Flux could be the promotion ecosystem if that catches on. I am currently doubtful that it will, just because I have yet to see any of those tools that even come close to something that I would think of implementing. I am glad people are thinking about solutions in this area. I just think that they are so far off from what is actually like needed that would meet any organization at any like real scale that really needs this. That, I just don't see them happening.
But I agree that they're very far off, but that seems to be the logical next step to do, and I'm pretty sure that actually we haven't seen the end of it yet.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Exactly.
Okay, we're using Crossplane from Burunkul. We're using Crossplane for ECR repos. What other safe resources can you recommend to move to Crossplane managed? It depends on the quality of providers, right? For AWS, Azure, and Google, there are always, of course, issues and stuff like that. But I think that for those three, you're safe with almost anything, really.
Yeah.
Now, there are some iffy ones, like I'm not very happy about GitHub provider, for example. But those big three, anything, really.
Yeah. And the one thing I would say is just like, and this I think very important for people to understand, just like how when you are dealing with persistent volumes in Kubernetes, if you are creating mission critical databases and things like that, you set the retain policy to keep, like to retain the volume when you delete the PVC. You do the same thing with the deletion strategy for an RDS instance in Crossplane, very likely, right? Like you can, just because, what does safe really mean? My guess by safe, what you mean here is, how do I prevent it from all of a sudden just getting like randomly deleted? Or oops, I did a kubectl delete and I deleted my RDS instance. A, RBAC. Right? So put RBAC around these things. But B, set the deletion policy to orphan. and it will not delete the resource in the cloud. Have an additional process that goes around and cleans up those resources, that alerts you when there's a resource that's not managed, right? There's ways of doing this. But just like we do that with persistent volumes.
It also depends on what your processes are, right? If you're really rigorous about keeping everything in Git, not allowing anything else, if you're really rigorous about doing peer reviews, right? You might not have to do it, but you need to be very disciplined, basically. And also, probably more importantly, if you're really rigorous in a way how you're maintaining your composite resource definitions, right? And everything else. Because the danger with Crossplane is that you willy-nilly change the composition, apply to the cluster, and then all hell broke loose because you made a mistake. Which is the same one actually you could make with Terraform if you're using modules, just to be clear. But the major difference is that when you make that change can instantly propagate to everything, instead of with Terraform modules, if you modify the module, there is a period of time until people actually apply it.
There's a reason why composition revisions exist, and for all of these things, Crossplane has the solutions. You can pin a specific composite claim to a specific revision of a composition as well. You don't get the auto updates then, right? But it's all, what I like about Crossplane is that we have all of the abilities to be as safe and manual as we want, to as automated and, you know, potentially dangerous as we want. And you can easily switch between these modes as you become more and more confident and mature with this technology, and your processes are ready to really allow the more flexibility that Crossplane gives us. So like, yeah, when you move to production, start with pinning to a composition revision. That's fine. When you get the confidence, then move it up to, you know, auto updating the compositions once you have everything in place to be a bit safer. That's fine.
From Misha, I'm a Flux fan also, but I need to do it for a client and I want to do the best I can.
That's around secure ArgoCD. That was around the secure ArgoCD.
Okay.
Yeah, as someone that works at a SI as well, I completely understand. Yes, sometimes we have to deal with the, you know, things we don't love. You know, follow their documentation. They do talk about how to secure it. It won't be secure, but it'll be, you know, less insecure than most ArgoCDs. So, you know, yeah.
Okay, from Akiva, it's not a question, of sharing that he's very happy with a smart tool called Chesmoi for backup restoration of my configuration. I haven't used it. Have you used it?
Never heard of it. I'll add that to my list, though.
Me too. Crossplane does not allow to update ECR lifecycle policy after creation. Is there any workaround for this problem? So I don't know whether you have practical. I'm not using it really. I don't use ECR myself. So I'm not sure what's happening there. What I do know is that, and not speaking about ECR exactly, most of the time, Crossplane is a reflection of the API, right? And I would suspect that actually AWS API does not allow you to update lifecycle policy. And this is a pure guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I would be very surprised that actually that's on Crossplane.
Yeah, I would expect that as well. It's either at the AWS level or it's at the Terraform level, because it may be the Terraform provider that's blocking that, which is being used to generate the Upjet AWS provider, which is used within Crossplane. So there may be at one of those two levels the limitation here. I don't believe that would be a Crossplane limitation. However, I also
it could be a bug. So
right,
it's possible it's a bug.
Yeah, I do everything I can to stay away from ECR. I really pray for the day that Amazon listen to their customers and listen to the #1 upvoted issue in years on their containers roadmap of allowing to create a repo on push and not make me pre-create a repository before I can push a container there, at which point I would be more than happy to use ECR again. But until they solve that and solve the ability for me to have a static token to log in to ECR and put every warning around that of security and all of that, but every other registry on planet Earth allows me to. And until they do those two things, it's hard for me to recommend ECR because I believe that beyond JFrog Artifactory, it's the worst container registry available today.
Okay, from Limbonic, probably. Assuming a multi-cloud, multi-cluster Kubernetes setup being a non-negotiable aspect of a platform solution, multi-cloud cluster, is there any stack that you could recommend to make a multi-cluster service mesh manageable? Aren't all service meshes now, to some extent, supporting multi-cluster setup?
So, yes, to each one to their different extents and to different levels of manageability and simplicity. Right? Like everyone does it differently. And the question is at what level you want it, right? Like, do you want it just at the mesh level? Do you want it as like at the CNI level? And then you do something like Cilium, multi-cluster Cilium and do that, right? Like there's like different levels at which you want the networking to be, let's say, meshed together. The other questions that come up are like, if you have overlapping CIDRs for your pods between clusters, only certain solutions can do that. Other ones can't, right? So you get into a bunch of complexities here. But from the stack perspective, multi-cloud, multi-cluster, I say for things like that, you need a fleet manager that is multi-cloud aware. That can be a build your own using something like Cluster API as the core mechanism to do things. That could be something like a SpectroCloud. That could be something like a D2IQ, which is now NKP from Nutanix.
It changed
that could be
again.
like well, D2IQ became NKP, which is Nutanix Kubernetes platform because they were purchased by Nutanix.
Okay, because they changed it. That thing it changed. The before D2 whatever IQ was something else. What was it?
Yeah, they weren't they the ones that also dealt with what was it before Kubernetes?
Mesos.
Mesos. Yeah,
it was
exactly.
Mesos.
They were
I didn't want to
Mesos.
say because I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Mesosphere. Yeah, Mesosphere, which then became and then D2IQ with Kubernetes. But it's the same thing as D2IQ. It's just like rebranded and also integrated really nicely into the Nutanix cloud platform. But there's that, or there's Giant Swarm, or there's a bunch of different options. My personal poison is SpectroCloud. But A, you want a fleet manager that allows me to manage this. And number two, when it comes to actually pushing out the service mesh itself, it comes down to two questions. If you are using Cilium as your CNI across all of the clusters, and what it provides in its service mesh, and I say that because it does not implement the full service mesh capabilities that other ones do.
But it might be implementing what you need.
Right, which is why if it implements everything that you need and you are already using it as your CNI, then it makes sense to use because it's going to be the easiest, lightest weight, all of that. If not, go with Istio Ambient Mesh. You can go with any of the dozen managed services around that if you want to pay, or do it yourself. That's completely up to you. But like, I do not believe in Linkerd or any of those ones that still believe in a sidecar model. I do not believe in the sidecar model anymore. The sidecar model is a failure. I thought Linkerd was much better than Istio until Istio brought around Ambient Mesh, at which point I moved back to Istio because any lowering of the amount of sidecars that I need is so much better from a resource perspective, cost perspective, maintenance perspective, all of that. So yeah, that's
I would say that that's one of my that's a pity, one of my disappointments. I actually did really prefer Linkerd back in the day over Istio. I don't understand why. But because
so
and I understand, first year of eBPFs and all that. I understand confusion. We don't know where it's going. But now we're not talking anymore about the novelty. Kind of like it's widely accepted that sidecars are evil.
Yes. So I think that Linkerd also, like, their main issue from my perspective, like, I didn't really care when it was a sidecar. The fact that they're, a bit more performant, like a bit less resource usage and all of that. What I liked about Linkerd was that it was a better API, I thought, than Istio. But now that we have Gamma, which is the only way you should be interfacing with a service mesh today, with the Gateway API, management, I don't even know what Gamma stands for. But Gateway API, Mesh Management Implementation or something. It's basically we use Gateway API as a implementation of service mesh. We now have a standard way of doing it, and almost all of them, I think even Linkerd, are implementing Gamma. At which point, I don't care if it's as good or worse of an API. I care that it's standard. And I want standard, so I prefer a less good API or less ergonomic API that I could move today to Istio and deploy it tomorrow to a cluster with Linkerd and the next day to a cluster with Cilium, and it will work the same, than having a better API that ties me to a specific implementation. Which is why I think Linkerd lost all of its value the second that Gamma came out, and that Istio has ambient mesh. So, sorry, Linkerd, I loved you guys, but not anymore.
Okay, we're over the time, but only one question left, so let's do that one. Any recommendation for an Azure DevOps Crossplane provider? I don't know what's happening today. People are only asking about the things I don't use. It's been like 5 years since I touched Azure DevOps. Are you using Azure DevOps?
I am not. I have customers that do.
And I'm guessing we're not talking about the pipelines themselves. We're probably talking about configuring it, right? I'm guessing. Because pipelines are pipelines. You don't want to put... Not yet. Actually, that's coming. Cannot talk about it yet. Anyway, I'm guessing that you don't know either because you're Googling it.
I mean, the answer is there is a Terraform provider, right? I was looking if there's a Crossplane provider. There isn't. There is a relatively good and maintained official Terraform provider. The answer is that it would be a matter of a few hours to create a Crossplane provider for this that would just work and then is easily updatable whenever the Terraform provider releases. So, like, it would be using Upjet and generating it from the Terraform provider. That would be the way to go.
Okay, I think that's all, folks, for today. See you all probably next week. I haven't checked my calendar. Probably. Very likely.
Hi, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.